everyone. I'm here to introduce sake to the restaurant, to you all, so that you have an intimate knowledge and you're experts when the guests are asking all their many questions about what is sake. So a lot of the questions right off the bat you may get, what is sake? It's rice wine, correct? Technically, no. So grapes, they have their own juice inside of the grape that is high in sugar. So everybody knows you mash up the grapes, you add a little bit of yeast, and that turns into alcohol. Very simply, you can make it at home. Anybody who's ever smelled some juice that was a little long in the tooth, that's that aroma of alcohol. But with grains, rice grains, wheat grains, which make beer, it's a starch and it needs to be turned into sugar first. To get a little scientific, essentially the process for making alcohol is sugar, yeast, and then that gives you alcohol and CO2, like champagne. That's when they do the pressure and that's how it gets its bubbles. But because we're starting with a grain, we need to turn that into sugar. So we won't get too technical, but it's the same process as beer, where they use koji, it's a Japanese old, and it eats only starch and it gives you sugar. Yeast eats only sugar and gives you alcohol. So that's rice, technically, scientifically, in a nutshell. So essentially, what are the different types of sake? Is it like wine, where there's red, there's white, there's all these different kinds? So, most guests will say they just had the sake in little white, it's called the tokari, at a sake bar. So there's much premium sake, and that's all that we'll be serving here at AYC. And what makes the difference is brown rice is just white rice with the outside taken off. So starch is the key here. So there's a couple, basically how a rice grain is composed is it has protein, it has fats, and it has starch or carbs, and it's those three. And at the sushi bar, when we eat maki rolls, that sushi rice is all mixed together. It's very nutritious. But with sake rice, it's actually the brown part. These proteins and fats, they do not turn into anything. Kind of like when we eat them. They're very fibrous and good for us, but they don't break down. So they're pushed to the outside. They're actually, it's called sake mai, or sake rice. It's a special type of rice. And those are on the outside. Now, what differentiates the different types of sake is actually how much we're going into the center of the rice grain. So on the outside, we have all those infermentables, and very quickly, we start to get to pure white rice, which is pure starch. So if you have starchy white rice, you break that down into very sugary porridge kind of, and then you add the yeast, and that turns into very clean floral alcohol. Now if you have more brown rice, that'll add extras along with the sugar, and then it goes all the way throughout the process and can affect the flavor at the end. So the big numbers to remember are 70, 60, 50. So we're gonna have a junmai style. This is in your notes. Junmai means that they're taking 30% of the rice grain away, and they're leaving 70% of that rice grain left. It's actually a little pearl of like puffy white rice, and it has kind of flavors that get kind of molassesy, because remember, we still have that brown rice going through, and it adds a lot of flavor and richness and character. The next number is 60%. This will be the one that you always want to recommend first, especially if people really like white wines, that they have that base and they're adventurous and want to try it. Ginjo, G-I-N-J-O, Ginjo is 60% left. So we're going a little bit further. So we're going to 60%. That means we've taken 40% of that rice grain, the outside only. They're shaving it off with the special machine and closing in layer by layer into 60%, which is ginjo, and it's a sweet spot. You really start, it's a totally different flavor. You get bright fruits, you can get anywhere from melon, you can get apple, you start getting a little maybe like strawberry or rose petal. This is all in your notes in the telescope. The back will start with the rustic flavors. You'll have more of the tropical flavors here, and pick any of them. Remember, because the only ingredients are rice, water, yeast, and then that koji, which turns it into that. So it's very subjective, and you can kind of play with the terminology. It's not going to have apples in it, and it's not going to have rose petals in it. It just has those 4 ingredients. So the ultra premium, we're only carrying one of those, is a full 50% of a grain of rice is taken away. This they just discard. Now imagine if you're a winemaker and all your harvested grapes are coming in and you're saying yes, no, and you're just discarding those. To make a bottle of wine with just the now half of your grapes, the price goes up. So with sake, it's not any better. It's just we're getting rid of some of the outside to lead to a pure, clean flavor. This will be very floral. So you can use pretty much any white flowers, you can use descriptors. They even go so crazy as one of them, I think it's on their sheet, actually says like ocean air, mountain breeze. It's kind of like Vouvray or white wines or even some Rieslings. You just want to use really light terms. So in the next video, we'll get into the different actual sakes. A couple terms to remember besides Junmai, Ginjo, and Daiginjo are Nigori, that's Nigori. So remember I talked about this looking like a sugary, kind of porridgey. It's actually pretty thick when it's in the giant tanks and it's starting its process and it's turning into alcohol. Now, this is a Nigori style. What they do is they actually filter it. So they put it through this cloth, right? It looks like your Egyptian cotton bed sheets, but like times 10, very fine threads. And they use pressure. And then the nectar, the water or sake comes out very clean and pure, right? You can see my light through. But oftentimes they'll use very coarse sheets, and that gives you a Nigori style, which is creamy. So what's great about this is that, and you want to be active when you're serving it, the bartenders will shake up their bottles very well, and you see how that light went away. The benefit of the Nigori style, and it's a unique, totally unique style, is that the alcohol is kind of buffered because you have those rice particles. So that lays on your palate, and then you get a little more kind of pina colada-ish flavors. You get some citrus in there. You get maybe some pineapple, some anisette, which is like black licorice. That's a unique style. Most sake will be crystal clear, right? And that's the majority of what we'll be serving. And we'll get into the specifics of the flavor profiles so you can accurately predict what the guest is going to be tasting with each sake.